Good morning and welcome to the second part of our webinar series on the Marie Curie Individual Fellowships. My name is Charles Betts. I'm happy to see many of you connecting again for our session. A quick recap maybe of what we discussed last time. So on Friday, many of you had joined as well. Where we discussed a bit more, let's say, the basics of Marie Curie, what the program is about, which different forms exist, what different panels exist, how the evaluation works, and all these elements. You should have received these slides just this morning by me. If not, maybe check your spam or send me a mail or write a question. What will we discuss today? So today will be about really the grant part, right? The grant writing part. So the really important part, I would say, even though all the rest is important as well. Now I won't most likely not tell you anything completely new. I mean, there's no golden formula for writing a successful proposal. There are some guidelines. Many of you are actually already aware of this, but I still think it's very important to repeat them and repeat them many times. You will receive a recording of both webinars after this one is finished, so you can rewatch it or look again at the slides. And I think it can be helpful because many times we are pretty good in writing, the scientific part of the project, describing what we want to do. But then there are some elements, some problems that come back in many proposals that I see, and we'll get a bit into the details of what they are and how you can prevent them. Because the main problem to me is that you, in your head, you know very much what you want to do and what it's about, what's the big picture, what you want to achieve in your project, but it might not be, it might be so obvious for you that you tend not to repeat it often enough in the proposal. So that's one thing that we can discuss. And then another major part is clarity, how you formulate your thoughts and your ideas. And I mean, it's a learning process, so we are here to learn. The webinar this time will take a bit longer. Let's see how long it will take. We scheduled 2 hours, maybe it will be a bit shorter. The reason is that I planned at least to answer more questions that might arise today directly at the end. We'll first start answering some of the questions that were posed last time. And then, as we go through the slides, you might have other questions that you post, and then we'll get to them at the end. If you want to ask questions in private, just feel free to send an email or whatever. We'll find a way. Let me check. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I think we can start. So this was a question that was raised last Friday on if we can provide written templates to guide you in the narrative. Not exactly sure that I understand the question completely. We sent you the links already to the empty template, but I would presume you mean a sort of a filled out template. So I cannot share obviously any successful or unsuccessful proposals that we reviewed in the past, but there are some ways. So first, as I repeat and will repeat many times, look at the Net for Mobility Handbook. You will find some examples of what belongs where in there. You will also find in there sometimes parts that are from the analysis of successful or failed proposals, just a few comments by the reviewers. They can be helpful as well. Then check with your host organization, because if you go, I mean, the choice isn't huge, but for example, if you go to the University of Luxembourg that had already quite a number of successful proposals, or maybe the LIH or LIST, the Institute for Science and Technology. These are the institutes that had a few successful candidates in the past, and they might be willing to share some of the proposals with you or not. I cannot guarantee this. But there are some ways, if you just Google, examples of successful MSCA I have proposals, you will find some. I listed some links here. You can have a look. They might be from different panels and different areas. I cannot guarantee that they're any good. Some of them claim they were successful. I didn't verify this. So big disclaimer there, but you can, maybe it will help you. And then I think in the last slides, I already sent you some links to the Cordis database, if not there in these slides. These are the database of all successful Marie Curie, for that matter, EU proposals, and you will be able to read the title and the abstract there. That might help you in writing the abstract. We'll get to the abstract later on as well. Then I was asked to give some examples of Marie Curie individual fellowship consultants. A big disclaimer here, this is not a complete list. I didn't work with many of these people. I think I worked previously with Euronovia, it's a French company, and ICCK, it's a German company. I haven't worked personally with the others. I know some of them by hearsay. There are certainly more organizations. They each work a bit differently. Some just offer courses, basically like this one, or maybe more intensive, I don't know. Some are really about one-on-one interaction remotely and giving you feedback. So it depends what you want. Depends, if your host can spend money on this, which is absolutely not guaranteed. As I said, there is no obligation for involving consultants, but it can help. Just to be very open, if anybody knows of any other consultants, we are very happy to add them to the list. This is not, very restrictive, and we don't want to promote anybody in particular. I was asked about the University of Luxembourg success rates, and then what was a bit more confusing is, higher ranked universities, and I imagine just higher ranked by some of the university rankings that are out there. If that means you will also have a higher success rate in Marie Curie's. I didn't provide a written answer because it's complex. I cannot give you, or at least I believe I cannot give you the direct Marie Curie success rates for the University of Luxembourg. You might want to contact them, and they might be able to give it to them. Maybe they're even on their website, I don't know, or in their annual report, which you can download. But the University of Luxembourg is doing quite well. Most of the Marie Curie proposals, I believe, are in the two multidisciplinary centers, the SNT, which is more ICT and security-based research, and the LCSB, which is more systems biology, but there are others, I believe, as well. But to be honest, I don't think it matters so much. Yes, it is important that you choose, the host is important, yes. But if you choose a host that hasn't hosted any Marie Curie proposals before, students before, that's fine too. They need to show that they're dedicated to this and that they're willing to promote your proposal. But it's not obligatory that they have this high track record or whatever. It's really not what's being evaluated most. So I don't think many proposals fail because, the university is not famous enough. Maybe it might be even the other way around, that very famous universities help for higher standards. I don't know, but I doubt both. So the short answer is, it doesn't really matter what the ranking of your university is, but you need certain information from your host organization that needs to be present in your proposal. So you need this information from your hosts. And if any of these questions are not, direct enough, you can rewrite them in the questions panel. Then there was a question if in part A of the form you had which host institute you have to enter. I presume this is, let's imagine you're a fellow, an applicant that comes from a different university and you want to apply for, let's say, a host in Luxembourg. Yes, the name you have to enter is the host in Luxembourg where you want to do this project, not your current host where you are staying, because they don't really care at this stage about this. Of course, if you're already staying at this host, which is under some that you want to do the Marie Curie, which is possible under some circumstance that we discussed last part, and then yes, it's the same. Partner organizations, so they have to be academic or industrial. I think we went into this last time, but just to recap, ideal case is if your main host, your main proposal is at academia, try to find a private host to do your secondment as a partner, and vice versa. If you're at a company, do choose academia. It's not obligatory. It can be the same sector. There's not even an obligation to do any secondments at all, to have any partners at all. But in my experience, it does add to the quality, at least in the case where it makes sense, right? You don't just choose a partner organization because you think it's important, but you should choose one that makes sense in your project, that where you will learn something that you couldn't learn any other way. Okay, so if I have to sum up, this is sort of a recap slide of today, I would say. Maybe you can print it out and look at it on a regular basis. Again, we discussed this last time, but there are three main evaluation criteria and three main parts of the proposal: the excellence, the impact, the implementation. They are averaged at a different degree, to a different degree in the final score, but you can by no means just leave one out or leave one section out. That's not how it works. Everything needs to be there. Follow the guidelines that we send you. Think about it not as a research article. Some of you are more junior researchers. You might not be used to writing research grants or very competitive research grants. So it's not like a research article. And I see this very often, that people write it like a review article or a science publication. It's not meant to be like this. You should really try to sell your idea and not delve into the long backgrounds and histories, because you're afraid you will forget to mention one of your potential reviewers. No, it should be a complete picture, don't get me wrong, but it stay to the basics and really focus on what you want to achieve and why. That's the important part. And we discussed the submission process last time. Submit early and submit often, and then be clear. Try to make people understand what you're writing. Don't try to use very complex language. It's not a literary work of art. It's a research proposal. People don't care if you repeat the same stupid words all over again. The message needs to come across. That's the important part. And then it needs to be credible, right? You have to show, if you claim to do something or to do a training or to do an experiment, and it's not credible, or you don't provide any proof or backup or further information, it might not be credible. So that's important. Then you can read the bullet points for yourself. As I said, it's more thought of like a recap. So, okay, so let's start with the basics again of the grant writing. So you only have one chance, right? Well, obviously it's one submission. You can resubmit next year, but that's not what you want to do. So you want to present your idea in this very condensed form. You want to address what is the actual problem. Why are you doing this? Why do we care? What is the bottleneck? Why hasn't it been done before? What's missing in your field or in other fields that you can provide in this project? And how will you create? How will your work or your results potentially come to this and have an impact, not only in what you do, but an impact in other fields as well? Because you might not be able to pinpoint this directly, because in science we never know exactly. But you might give some thoughts, and again, you don't exaggerate that you will, cure cancer or lead to world peace, but just speculation is fine as long as it's clear it's speculation. And then mention what you want to do. How much it will cost is relative. You don't have to put a detailed budget of how much your pipetting costs are and your research expenditures, but it should be something that just makes sense. You don't propose a clinical trial and just expect it to fund through the Marie Curie program. That's not realistic. And the experts, they have on average around 2 hours, probably even less, to read your proposals. They have a whole stack, maybe 10 or so, maybe more. They might be stressed, they might be tired. So go easy on them and try to make it easily digestible, and care about how you present your text and your thoughts. I know it's easy to forget, and it's not something that we necessarily learned in our curricula, but the way you present your thoughts and your ideas, they matter a lot. And if you just try to cram all possible things and details into these 10 pages, it's not a good idea. People, I think the reviewers, they care more about having the key messages and understanding them easily and fast, and having all these little tiny details and things and squeeze text, and you will read in the template the text size, the font size that you need to respect, and then people try to fit things into tables because they can use slightly smaller text. That's really not what you should do. Tables are fine, bullet points are fine if you use them for a specific purpose of showing something in an easily digestible way, but not to cram in more details than you can fit. Then the experts, well, there's certainly somebody that's directly from your field, but there might be people that are remotely from your field, so you should take this into account. Be clear. Clarity, as I said, this is something we'll get to again and again. Once you will send me your texts, it might be something that I comment quite often. Don't take this negatively. It's really just meant that you think about this passage or paragraph again, and rewrite it in a more clear way that it's easily understandable. And then go straight to the point, right? Don't build your nice sentence. And I'm doing this. My background is in research too, and when I was writing my reports, and I was reviewing them with my principal investigator, who was much more experienced, obviously. You notice that you can cut away half of your sentences because you're just used to using all these formalities, and you realize they don't mean anything. So cut away everything that has no meaning, and that just leave your sentence that it's easily understandable, and don't write 5-line sentences because people get tired and they forget the beginning of the sentence. It's obvious, all these things, but it's important to repeat, I think. Then, educate your experts, because, as I said, not all of them might be directly from your field. So give them some context, some thoughts. Obviously, don't be condescending, but I guess that's obvious. Don't repeat. That's sort of be taken with a grain of salt. Don't repeat some things over and over again. But there are some exceptions, like the main message of your experiments, of your proposal. It's fine if you repeat it or bring it in slightly different forms over and over again throughout the proposal. Not extensively, but just a half a sentence or so to remind the tired reviewer that, oh yeah, right, we are speaking about this, and that's why it matters. Then try not to hide any things from your CV or from things that you think will fail, because the reviewers, they're used to this. They will find this out, and it will be their criticism. Much easier if you have obvious weak points, to just point them out yourself and show that you thought about them. Tell them, there's a risk that this will fail, and then we will do blah blah blah. That's fine, right? But don't try to hide the complexity. And then, build a nice story. Use graphics that are large enough, not with tiny text that nobody will read. Don't use, things that if you print them out in black and white, nobody can distinguish. All these trivial examples. But leave some space to breathe, because often I see the proposals, they're just like this square, huge paragraph, and it's not easy to read. Not for me, and certainly not for the reviewers. Obviously, respect the numbering, how information is structured in the template. You can add additional subsections, and at the very end of this presentation, I again, based on this NCP handbook, I give you some more detailed subsections that I would recommend using. You don't have to use all of those, but at least use the ones that are in the main template. But don't, erase them or just invent a new structure with the main numbering, because it will confuse everybody. Here's again the link for the guide for applicants. Respect the guidelines that are written in there, the font size and the page limits. Because I think in the past, what was done, I might be wrong, but in the past, once you were over this 10-page limit, there was just a text inserted for the reviewers that said that you are free to ignore this. But I think now actually what's being done is these pages will just be cut, so they will be lost, right? And that's why, again, submit early, that you can see how it looks in the PDF, etc. Because I see this very often, that people in the last 2 days, they get some feedback from whomever that they were waiting for a long time, and then they're over this 10-page limit and they are freaking out. So try to avoid this. I showed you also more in detail last time how to get the templates. Okay, so we get to the part A. This is more about the administrative part, the general information. Mostly it will be filled, or at least part of it will be filled out by your host organization, but you can ease their work in already pre-filling what you know. It's like the title, the acronym, which panel you choose, some keywords, the abstract, which is very important, but again, you can update it throughout the process, that's no problem. The budget is calculated automatically. You basically just say, I will apply for, most of you will apply for 24 months. So it's just calculated and multiplied by the fixed amount. There's some parts of ethics, some checkboxes maybe. Sometimes, in rare cases, the commission will get back to you with additional questions. If you have ethics sensitive elements in your proposal, there's a guideline. Again, you just follow it, fill out these elements. It's especially important, if you deal with stem cells and patient material and these kinds of things. You will see this. It's not important for most of you, but for those of you who are concerned, just read this or get back to us. Then acronyms matter. These are two acronyms, real acronyms that people use for submission. Not sure if the proposal was successful, but personally, when I was submitting my first grant some years ago, I didn't understand what the real need for an acronym is. I thought, well, there's proposal submission number. I understand that. There's the title, but why do I need the acronym? The acronym is important if you have a panel of reviewers, and they will rank all the proposals in the end, and they will discuss and they will refer to your proposal, and they will not refer to proposal number 1035678, but they will they will remember the acronym. They won't remember the whole title, but they will remember the acronym. And if you have a terrible acronym of just letters that make no sense, they will not remember it. So if you have something that makes sense, it's much easier. It's even easier if you have something that's just easy to pronounce and not directly important in your proposal than using something that doesn't make any sense. That's too complicated. I shouldn't have to say this, but try, to at least think if your acronym might be a swear word in another language. It sounds silly, but it does happen, trust me. And the reviewers are obviously not all native English speakers. And you can check if your acronym already exists, or if it's a trademark. I wouldn't call my project whatever, Big Mac or something like that. But then again, I think you should be fine even then, but it might be a bit too silly, Okay, so if we go to the abstract is very important. Often people write a draft of the abstract initially to help them write the proposal, and then they get back to the abstract at the very end, because you should take in everything that's in your proposal and condense it in the abstract. It's extremely difficult. I put a link there. There it is, to have a look at what other people did. So these were obviously successful Marie Curie proposals. So look at how they look like. I believe you can even filter by keywords and domains, so you can do that just to get an idea. But it's really an extreme condensation of the whole project. And it's always good to include elements that should come somewhere in your proposal. Why do we care? Is this a priority for the EU? You might not know too much about EU politics and policies and initiatives that exist. We are there to help you with that, but honestly, very often it's just as simple as Googling, European Commission and your keyword, whatever it is that you're working on, blockchain, right? Artificial intelligence. You look for policy papers by the European Commission, you enter these few keywords and you will find something. So you can always link to these things, because the advantage is you don't have to explain to your reviewer why this is important, because you can say, well, the EU already considers this a priority. And it's easy, right? It's one sentence and it's done. And why now? Why are you the best to do this? Don't get into details really in the abstract, but use a sentence to bring this in. Absolutely no background literature in the abstracts, obviously, or things that need to be explained in detail. Just stay simple and try to explain the main things, because the abstract will be used very much to identify who should review your proposal, right? And the person choosing these reviewers, he might not be from your field, so he might not understand your language and might point you to the wrong reviewer, so to speak. You can stay in the third person, and that's fine. You can read more about these examples in the NCP handbook as well. And then, there's still all the parts of the proposal, not only the research, but really bring back this training part. That's very important. The career development part is a very important part of the Marie Curie program. Maybe a little bit about dissemination and communication. And we'll get into more detail about this. You will see on some of the slides, I wrote a quick skip sign at the top. It means you can read this over, and I will not get into it too much in detail, because these are either, they're not that very important, or it might be more easy for you to just read this at home when you're quiet and actually writing the proposal. So the introduction, right? The introduction, many people start the introduction by going to the background and literature, and I spend one whole page of reading all these things and all these references before I know what you actually want to do in your proposal. And it can be a problem. I personally, and I think many reviewers as well, they want to know what you're doing. It's very important, Yeah, we read your title, but what do you want to achieve? Why is it important? And then, yes, you can refer to what's called the state of the art. So that means the background. It's what do we know about this? What have other people, or you, or your future host, published about this? But importantly, how will you go beyond what's already known, beyond the state of the art? Then you bring in your research objectives. That's very important because it shows some structure, shows you can say, you know, my overall aim objective is this and that, and here are my research objectives. Number 1, number 2, number 3, whatever. This is important because it structures your proposal, it structures your thinking, it structures your experiments, and you can use this structure throughout. You can always refer back to this, because in the end, you know, later on, then you speak about your methodology, your approach, your work packages, and you can all use the same structure of your research objectives. And it can be complex. Obviously, I understand that one research objective might be covered by several work packages or several methods and approaches. It's fine, but you know, you can use numbering and refer to this. It clearly shows that you're well organized and thought thoroughly about this. And the methodology, yeah, you know, why are you using this technology, techniques that you're using? Are they appropriate? They have to be clear. It has to be clear what you're doing. You just don't say, well, you know, I will use machine X and it will give me the results. Also, you shouldn't go into too many details. It's a double-edged sword, and it's not easy to walk that line. I agree, but you need to find some middle ground there. It needs to be understandable for the reviewers why you chose the methods that you're choosing, why it's the right methods. Yeah, and then you can give more details later on in the work plan where you describe your work packages in part 3. Then, yeah, highlight the novelty. You want to show, that's what I said before, how you go beyond the state of the art. Why is this an innovative, a new, a novel project? Why are you not just copying what other people have done? And if you do, you know, what did you change, and how do you expect to achieve different results? Then describe a bit what this will mean to your research field, but obviously also other research fields. You might speculate there, but that's fine. You know, just say that this is speculation, but it might have an impact here and there. Gender dimension, this is something that people confuse sometimes, and it's an important element of EU research proposals now. This gender dimension shouldn't be taken lightly. What it means is, does your experiments that you do they have, is gender or sex somehow can it influence your project? I give you an example. Let's imagine you work on neurodegeneration, Parkinson's disease, and you just describe your experiments and what you want to achieve, etc. And in your patient material, but then there is, for example, in this disease, there's a strong divergence between how this affects females to males. So this is an important element, and you just need to show that you're thinking about it, right? That you're taking this into account. Even if you're only studying, you know, male participants or whatever, discuss why and that this is just the main point is, don't ignore it and think, well, it's always been done like this, or it's easier, I don't have to explain it. No, you do have to explain why, that you're just thinking about this. The knowledge transfer, that's a second part that's extremely important. It's a bit harder to write, I think, for you than the background and the science. You might not be so used to thinking about it like this. The knowledge transferred, and there are two parts to this question. It's the transfer from you to your host and from your host to you. Sounds very obvious, right? You want to complement each other. But then if we get to the writing part, it's not trivial, because you might not know what your host knows and your host might not know what you know. So you need to discuss this with them. You need to discuss what kind of knowledge and skills and techniques and results are already existing at the host, how those will help you, how you will learn about them, because they're not of any use to you if they exist in somebody's cupboard and nobody tells you about them, but you need to show really concretely how somebody will take their time and talk to you about them and teach you at least the ones that matter, that are important for this project. And then on the other way around, you need to describe what's unique about you, or what you might have done some experiments or some skills that your host has not at all, and how will you bring this knowledge to them in a sustainable manner? That meaning, even after your project is over, how will this knowledge stay somehow? So you need to think about these things, and you need to discuss it a bit with your host. As I said, this is not trivial, and it's not something that you should leave for the very last minute before submission. By the way, your network, your connections, your collaborators, these are also part of this knowledge transfer, right? You can, and vice versa, also from the host. If you can bring new collaborators to the host, this might be important, not only for your project, but also in the long run. So you can highlight this. Then for the global fellowships, GF, this is, it's a bit more tricky because you really want to bring this, and more important, obviously, because you need to bring this skills from this third country where you learned them, let's say the US or China, back to Europe, and how you, and obviously you were there for 1 or 2 years, so it's much more important to really describe it. And describe your training, how it will be done, when it will be done, where it will be done. These are very important elements, that is training, how you develop your career. Then mention this personal career development plan, CDP. There's plenty of details in this handbook, survivor guide for Net for Mobility. This, you don't have to have developed this. It's not something you submit as part of your proposal. But what you basically describe in your proposal is that you will take your time throughout the proposal, throughout your project, sit down with your supervisor or supervisors, or maybe external managers or whomever, and think about your career, how you want to develop it. So this plan should be a deliverable of your project. It shouldn't be something that you submit during the proposal. And let me know if this was clear or not. Then the quality of the host. This is, I mean, I will say this for every section because all of them are important. But this is also important, and it gets neglected sometimes. It's often easier if you go to an academic host because they are used to this. They will just send you their standard, short version of their CV with their track record and recent number of publications. Might be a bit more tricky if you go to private host, but it's nonetheless, it's very important, and you need to discuss this early on so that you can develop it further and that I can comment on it and tell you what's missing. It's really, what's meant here is you want to show that your host has some qualifications. Doesn't mean that they need to be a professor or even a doctorate at a private company. Many people are not, but they are very good generally in what they do, and that's what you need to highlight. Maybe you can highlight that they have been training other people before, so it's not something that's completely new to them. Obviously, if they haven't, then you write a bit around this. You improvise, or write. You don't invent something. Don't get me wrong, but you mention, how they are still or appear to be capable of transferring this knowledge and guiding you. Then describe also about not only the host, but obviously also the secondment host, if you have one, and the environment. So the institute, other research labs, other units in a company, and how you will interact with them, why they will be beneficial, this interaction for you in the long term, for your career again. Then there is this thing called European Charter for Researchers. Just look this up. You will find it quite easily. Especially the large research institutions, they have already sort of signed this charter, but if you're a smaller host, it's no problem if you just say that your host will respect this EU charter, but mention it because it's important, and send it to your host if they don't know about it. It's mostly things that should be fairly obvious, but we all know how research is, and that it's not always the obvious things that are the reality. Okay, independence. You will see this when you get writing. There are some parts that sound very similar, and you tend to get lost in what information needs to go where. We can help you with this. You will also find, again, tips in this handbook. But your independence is a bit about how you will gain more independence through this project. And it's really personalized, because you might already be very independent, and you might have, you might be an assistant professor somewhere. But it should still be important that this project will even increase this independence, and we need to highlight how. And I go into the details in the bullet points. You speak about your major achievements. Don't repeat your CV, just simply, but you try to make it a bit a personal story, build your personal narrative around this. And then how it should be about, and the proposal in general, for that matter, should be about you realizing where you stand right now in terms of your career and your skills and your knowledge, and where you want to be in after this project, and even beyond, in the future, and how this will be a stepping stone of reaching this goal. Yeah, there are some other remarks. I won't get into them in much detail. Very often we get asked about preliminary results. You can include them. They're by no means necessary. They can be helpful, but don't dedicate pages and pages of text to them. That's certainly not necessary, and it might, leave you with little room to describe actually what you want to do, and that's what the reviewers will care about. Yeah, the rest you can read. The part 2, so we get now to the impact part of your research proposal. So what impact will this leave after and during your project? So one impact should be on your career. So it should, and there you see a bit the link to the previous section where we spoke about the independence. Here you can really get even more personal, and describe what kind of future career you want. And it can be anything. It can be you might write that you want to start your own company or work for a private company that does research. And that's fine. The European Commission doesn't care about if you stay in academia or not, but they care about that you can reach the goals that you want to reach. So write about this, and it's also fine if you write, I'm from whatever country that's not Europe, and will come to Luxembourg, learn about this, and then go back to my original country and apply it there. That's fine. The EU doesn't necessarily care that this knowledge must stay in Europe. It cares about an impact that your knowledge has, and it might be even greater if you go abroad and back to your home country. Who knows? You can speak about why you chose the country that you chose. I hope Luxembourg in that matter. And then you can refer, that's a bit abstract for most of you, I believe, to the ERA, the European Research Area. There are some links in there that you can click, and you can also just Google it. The ERA, it's a concept from the European Commission that basically describes a single market without any country borders inside Europe of the knowledge and researchers. There should be a free flow of ideas and research results, etc. A bit this concept, you can read about it, and you can make a link to it if you want. never hurts. You can also speak about the sustainability of your cooperation and collaboration after your project will be over. You will probably move on to a different place in the world, but you might want to stay connected, which is natural, I guess. So you can speak about that too. Yeah, enhancing your career prospects. Further points are, you can refer back to your back to your training objectives, or forward to your training objectives if you haven't mentioned them yet, because you might not have all the skills that you need or want to achieve your career goals, and your host might not be the person or organization that can provide all of this training that you need. So a lot of the training will be what we call on-hands training, or training through research, things that you learn by doing the experiments. But there's also other things other trainings that you need to go to, some company, some other university to do this, some conference. So also explain what they are and how they will enhance your career prospects. Transferable skills. This is also a concept that comes back again and again. There's a huge list of transferable skills. They're all important, I guess. You don't have to mention every single one, just mention the ones that are the most important, but mention some. Don't mention only the research skills that you want to learn, but mention about, because at some point you want to be an independent researcher probably, or a professor, or, lead a company, or goodness what. And there are skills demanded that you will not get through your experiments and your research. So there can be about communication, about writing proposals, all these things. But you need to think about those as well. Don't forget them. An important part, and it often gets misunderstood or confused, is exploitation, dissemination, and communication. So 3 separate things. I'll mention them a little bit. Once you get to these parts, you can get back to me, and I can send you some slides, especially on this. You can also very easily Google, European Commission training on dissemination, something like that, and you will find 20 PDFs that you can just have a look at. Dissemination is if you communicate your research results to professionals from your area, let's say. And it can be publications, but it can be, patents. It can be, patents actually is more, again, the exploitation, but it can be research notes. It can be things you speak to policymakers about it, how they can use whatever you did to, better society or whatever. Or it can be something, a note, an internal note that your company can use to optimize their process in the future. It doesn't have to be made public, but you need to show that the results and the impact of what you're doing will not just be simply lost in a cupboard somewhere after you're finished, which sadly often happens in research. Exploitation is more about really using this in another way to valorize the idea. I posted one link to a slideshow explaining it in more detail, but it can be really about patents and IPR rights and all these things, commercial applications, etc. And it can be speculative again, because you might not exactly know what you get out of it, but at least mention it. And then communication, it's separate from dissemination, and that's important because people often misunderstand. Communication is about non-professional targets, let's say. So you can communicate to most cases, the larger audience, the larger public, the general public, the media. It's about people that are not professionals in your area, that will not read your science paper, But then, and so it also means that you need to speak to them in a very different language and in a different way. Here in Luxembourg, there are some, and you can look up the FNR, the Fondation Nationale de la Recherche, the National Science Fund, which has, and your hosts often know about this, they often have yearly events that you can very easily integrate yourself in, where you present yourself, what you do. They have a researchers day that you can participate, where the larger audience comes and you can present easily understandable experiments of your results. And it's very important that you go into details and discuss this with your hosts and think about it, not just write, oh yeah, I will communicate this to the general public, because everybody writes this and it doesn't mean anything, but show that you actually thought about this. Or they have the FNR, again, for example, has this program called Chercheurs à l'école, researchers in school, where you can participate and you will go, well, this year it was cancelled, but next year, let's keep our fingers crossed, we'll be back, where you as a researcher go to high schools and you explain to students, why research is great and isn't, whatever, but tell them about your daily life and make them understand what you do, why is it important, etc. And so there are concrete and easily usable examples, but you just need to think about them. Internet presence, it's a thing. People do their websites and Twitter accounts and God knows what. You can mention this, and it can be something that's actually an added value. Sometimes it's not, and then it feels a bit unnatural, but it can be. Okay, some more detailed bullet points that I'll address in more detail. So we're now in part 3 of the proposal, and that's the implementation. So implementation means describe and organize the work and structure your work so that people understand what you want to do, when, and what are the checkpoints, etc. Again, don't neglect this part. It's very important, and it's very easily to be seen if you didn't take your time into and invest into this part of the proposal, because it will sound extremely generic and unrealistic. So really, and it will help you, trust me, it will help you yourself to organize your work. I learned about Gantt charts also the first time I wrote a research proposal, and it would have helped me so much earlier in research. Nobody told me about these things. They were not part of my curriculum. So use these concepts, use these things. There are examples in the guidebooks again, but get into the details how you structure it. Organize your work into work packages, and they should be logic. Shouldn't be too many. There shouldn't be too little. I think I'll get into them in a different slide. I mentioned in the previous webinar on Friday, the deliverables and the milestones. So I won't scrap them and get into too much detail. Then part 3.2 is about the management structure and the risk management. So management structure means it can be tricky to understand again what this means, and many people get it wrong the first time. It's about how is your decision-making process, basically. How do you exchange with your host and the people at your host organization? Who can decide on what, when, are there any checkpoints? Basically, the idea is that you're not left alone with your research, and once something goes wrong, nobody cares and nobody checks on you. It shouldn't be that somebody's looking over your shoulder all the time, by no means, but it should be to help you in times and parts where you need it. For example, the financial and management of your project. It's not something that you are used to do or care about or think about, this reporting, but show that your host knows about this, and has at least somebody that you can refer to once you have questions. That there's like an open door policy or something like that. It can be about, as I said, monitoring the process. It can be about valorizing your project, because you might not recognize an outcome of one experiment that's very relevant, but somebody in your tech transfer office might say, hey, you can make a patent out of this, or we can think about this further. So just show that there is some sort of exchange between you and other sort of points within your host organization. And risk management, also very important. It's people often ask about concrete examples. It's not always tricky, because it can be either way too specific or way not specific enough. It basically means, what are the things that you think can go wrong and that you can address somehow? There are some things that can go wrong and you cannot address them. And I'm not even speaking about, resurgence and the second wave of COVID, canceling your project or something like that. Obviously, that's something that you are not expected to have a backup plan for. But imagine you develop a solution, and for the solution you need, let's say the output of the solution is in work package 3, and for this to even work, you first need to complete work package 2 successfully. And so what happens if you cannot do this? What happens if the experiments don't work, the machine doesn't work, something like that? So think about alternatives. And you can mention the plan B, you can mention the likelihood of this happening, but don't just jump over this. And then, maybe, once you get to proposal writing, we can discuss this in more detail. Then sometimes you have, especially in the larger hosts, you have an internal office that's helping you with EU projects and proposals, or the HR department, and show that that they will be able to help you somehow. And that's always a good sign if you can show this. Again, they're not expected to write a proposal for you, don't get me wrong. There's also a part on the host support and the environment. Again, you will see, right, there's a bit of overlap, or potential overlap, with what we discussed before. So this is more about, how does your host help you solve these technical issues, like the financial issues that we discussed before. For example, have they had Marie Curie students before, and what happened to them? That's an easy example. So obviously, it's not always possible to answer this way, but if it is, then it's a good thing to mention. Or maybe your host had other types of research projects with similar types of proposals, so you can mention those. Maybe you can distinguish between the tasks that your host has versus your secondant host, and how you will exchange between them, how you will make use of your collaboration network of your host to advance your career, etc. Regarding your CV, I think there's a template there. Please respect this 5-page limit and stick to the essentials and the structure that's given. Try to obviously give a good impression of your achievements, but do it in an easily understandable way, right? Try to think like it's not like a job interview, right? It's more like really like and especially an academic job interview, because they are very different than the private ones. But think about what a reviewer that doesn't know you want to know about you. If he will trust you with the money to do this project, what kind of proof can you show them that you're motivated to do this, that you have the capacity to do this, etc. Again, be clear, and if there are any obvious gaps, which is fine, address them. Maybe you don't have to, but often it will lead just to question marks and second thoughts of the reviewers. You can, highlight your name in references, and these are like these pretty standard things. Give the dates. That's something that's important. Give dates of when you did what to when. Sometimes people are too unspecific. They say, first I did my bachelor's, and then I did my master's, and then I did my PhD. But at least, give yearly dates, if not exact dates or exact numbers, how long you stayed where, because people care about these things. Also for your eligibility, for that matter. Whenever you do, so we are moving more to the general recommendations now, as you see. Whenever you do claim something, try to back it up, right? If you say, oh, it's easily doable, this project for me, because I'm great, that's good for you, but it might not be very clear to the reviewer. So maybe back up your claims by giving. You don't have to give each time a very detailed answer, but show that you thought about it, that it's not a blank phrase, an empty phrase that you're using. Repeatedly speak, and here I told you shouldn't repeat some things too much, but some things you should repeat. Speak about your career development. That's an important thing, about your skills and leadership skills, which will lead to your independence. Highlight again and again how there is some symbiosis between you and your host, how both of you benefit from this project. And maybe how you engage with citizens, because what the European Commission doesn't want is just another project that leads to a project report that ends up maybe somewhere on a website and nobody reads. But it should be more and more important that people learn about the things that we as scientists do, because it's their money in the end that we're using. Refer to relevant EU documents and policies and initiatives. Now everybody speaks about the Green Deal, or soon people will speak about the relaunching European economy. Maybe your research is not about this at all, and then obviously you don't have to refer to it. But I'm pretty sure that whatever domain there is some sort of somebody at the European Commission already thought about something similar, and you can make a link to that document and position paper, just as I said before. Then there are some keywords that you can look up, and it's always good to mention them somewhere. I mentioned this before, but be nice to your evaluators and use easily understandable structure. Very often you can summarize a huge paragraph in 3 bullet points. Maybe the bullet points even take the same amount of space than your huge paragraph, but objectively or subjectively by the evaluators, it will be so much easier to understand your key messages, and it will help you understand your own key messages. The ethics part, I mentioned it briefly. If there are ethical issues and there is sort of a formula that you can fill out, tick boxes that you can fill out. If there are any obvious ethical issues, you need to get into more details on them. Resubmissions, I haven't spoken about them. If you have, it might be that you submitted your project already, which is fine. Actually, people tend to have a higher success rate the second time they submit, because they take into account the recommendations by the evaluators. If this is the case, there's a checkbox, I think, somewhere during submission that you need to click. And it only counts as a resubmission if it's the same institute, the same candidate, and the same supervisor, meaning the same principal, professor, whatever, inside this university. If you do go to the different project at a different supervisor, but at the same host, then it's not a resubmission. and obviously don't make references to your previous proposal. Don't say, last time I wrote about this, so just, the reviewers will likely not have access to this proposal. They might receive an evaluation summary of your previous proposal. I'm not even sure if that's the case, but I think so. So obviously try to address the weak points from that. And if you have, we can discuss it in more details if you think that's true or not. Here is, you don't have to read this from the screen, but you will, or you have received the slides so you can look at it in more detail. This is what I suggest as a structure, and you will, if you compare it to the official template, it's much more granular. But this is based on this Net for Mobility guide that I mention all the time, and it really helps to use this more detailed structure, because this way you tend to better explain. It gives you more of a framework of what you want to explain in the following paragraphs and sentences, if you have a clear title, and even though it might take you a few more lines. So that's it from my side for this second part of the grant writing. Give me 2 minutes that I look at the questions that you wrote so that I can address them, maybe hopefully directly. So there is the question of who has a better success rates, the universities or the companies. Obviously, you cannot say it generally, because one private host might have a better success rate if they had one proposal submitted and funded than the MIT, who is a very good university. But if we look just on the panels, so if you choose this, we discussed this last time, this so-called society and enterprise panel, which you cannot choose if you're at the university. On paper, you have already almost twice the success rate, because there's a fixed budget that only companies and NGOs can apply for. And what we've seen in the past, no guarantee that it stays this way, but that this budget is often underused. So not so many people apply for it. And that leads to an on average success rate of 26, 28%. If we look at all the proposals in this panel, and while when we look at the standard panel, which is generally the one that universities go for, we are more around 15%, 15%. So on paper, it gives you an advantage, but you need to look at the context, right? If you have a host at a university that gives you fantastic support and great support during the writing process, it might make your proposal better and help you succeed in the more competitive panel. So there's no absolute answer to this. Is there a research proposal form for the fellowship? I'm not exactly sure I understand the question. I suppose you mean the template that you need to follow. So yes, there is. We described in detail where you can find the template in the last proposal or on the slides that you received. But just even if you just Google, MSCA IF research template or proposal template, you will find it. And if not, if it's still unclear, just send me again a message or an email. Okay, is it possible to do a research stay at a US host for about a month? No, it's not in the European Fellowship scheme. It certainly wouldn't count as a short stay. I can guarantee that. Secondments can only be in, as I said before, in member states or associated countries. And again, you can look at the list who the associated countries are. In this case, you would have to do basically a global fellowship if you really plan to do this. And it might have some other advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so there's a question that some host institutions have some sort of support structure and external reviewers, and the question is how likely are the how similar are the comments from these reviewers to the ones that will be given by the actual reviewers? There's no guarantee. It's difficult to answer. Obviously, if you have very obvious weak points, it will be seen by both your host organization reviewers and your professional expert reviewers. While if it might be that the reviewer that will read your proposal just doesn't care about this weak point and likes or dislikes your proposal so much that he doesn't care about this. So it's just like submitting a paper. It's a bit of a lottery, and that's unfortunate, but that's the reality of science. But just to sum it up, it's always better to have some feedback on your proposal than to not have any at all, regardless from whom this review or comments come. However, you can also overdo it, and it can be that you receive so many comments and that you're sort of drowned, or it might be that you receive, comments that go in opposite direction. Somebody might tell you, "Oh, you don't give enough details," and the other person might tell you, "Oh, you give too many details," and then it can get confusing. I cannot guarantee that this is not the case if you send this to us. I can always only give my 2 cents and take them for what they're worth. But in my opinion, it's always better to get feedback than not to get any feedback at all. As long as you're willing to incorporate this feedback, obviously, and as long as you receive this feedback early enough that you can actually incorporate it. Let me check if there's anything else. Yeah, so can we share any successful research proposals? I mentioned this at the very beginning of this seminar. Maybe you missed it. I cannot share any successful research proposals for privacy reasons, obviously. What you can do is I gave some options at the beginning of the presentation. Maybe you missed it. But what you can do is you can speak to your host if they had already some successful candidates, and they might put you either in contact or they might send them their proposals. I don't know. You can look at this Net for Mobility guide, where it's not the same thing, but there are at least some comments on mistakes that people have done in the past. I also gave in the links, and maybe I will just quickly go back to this slide. Here it is. And obviously you need to click on the links on your slides that you hopefully received. If you just Google successful Marie Curie IF proposals, it takes you, I think, 10 minutes, probably less, to find some examples. Here are some examples that I posted. As I said before, I cannot guarantee that they were indeed successful or of high quality or whatever, but you can have a look, right? Maybe you find something that's useful for you. Okay, there's somebody that said he doesn't have any recent publications, although he did the PhD in 2016. If it will affect the score. There is, again, no obvious answer. It might and it might not. That doesn't help you, of course, as an answer. It might affect because there might be some reviewers that really only care that you published in super high journals, and that's not, shouldn't be their job, to be honest. Shouldn't be what the Marie Curie programs are about. what you need to convey in your proposal and your CV is that maybe you have a reason why you didn't have any publications since this time. Maybe you've been doing revisions for 5 years. That's the reality for some people. Maybe you did a job where you don't publish, and that's fine. That's a real reason. And as long as you address this reason, I think it can help at least mitigate the potential impact or the criticism from a reviewer. If he still has these comments, well, then there's nothing we can do about it. But it shouldn't in theory affect it. You know, if you say, well, you know, you did your PhD in 2016 and then you stayed in research and all your experiments failed in the last 5 years or so, that's a reality too, right? It doesn't mean that you were lazy or didn't care about science, but it's another reason, right? So try to be honest about it and open, and if you need more specifics, we can discuss it later on. Yeah, then there's a more numeric, let's say, question on if you need some sort of amount of publications per year or whatever. No, certainly not. You don't need any H scores and I scores and whatever scores there are of a certain amount. You don't need a certain amount of publications. What the reviewers are told, and you can again look at I put the link in the slides as well, the guidebook that's not meant for applicants, but the guidebook that's meant for reviewers. There you will get some idea of what the reviewers are being told by the European Commission. But what the idea of what they're being told is that they should give context to your career. Meaning, if you're an established professor and you apply for a Marie Curie program, and in your previous job you had, 3 postdocs under you and 5 technicians, yeah, you kind of expected to have a few publications. Even then, there's no absolute number, but just by gut feeling, obviously that should mean you need to be some more productive than somebody that was at a university that had only very low funding, and who's had maybe a junior professor as a mentor during the PhD or after the PhD. All these things affect your career, obviously, and they affect of how much and how little you publish. Somebody might have published 20 papers, and they're all sort of garbage papers in 2nd tier or 5th tier predatory journals. So, the absolute number of publications doesn't matter so much. What matters is context. And so the context you can address in your proposal. You get the chance to give context. They consider publications under review. Yeah, you mentioned them. You in your proposal, in your CV part, you say, well, this paper is under review, and they can take it for granted or not. You can obviously lie about it, and they have no way of proving that you're lying, except maybe if they know somebody in the journal, which would be a big problem. Be very clear, I'm not saying you should lie, but what I'm saying is, even if you write it's under revision, they might just say, well, if it's not published, I don't care. This again comes down to some reviewers. Some reviewers are like this, and we can debate of whether they should be like this or not, but the reality we all know is what it is. So yeah, mention it if they're under revision. Somebody says he's a Eurotech MSCA fellow. Not exactly sure what it means. Probably you were in an ITN and international or European training network, Marie Curie, during a PhD. If I'm not if I understand your question correctly, sure, you can mention this in your CV and even in your text. It might bring more experience because it's a competitive proposal, but there are other oh, it's a co-fund, I see. Yeah, it's, you know, co-fund calls are more competitive in general than if you just write an email to a professor who has some money lying around and says, yeah, I'll take you. So yeah, I mean, it's an accomplishment that you did. So you can, of course, refer to it in your proposal and especially in your CV. Okay, let me see. So I think we covered the questions that I've gotten so far. Maybe I wait for 1 or 2 more minutes if there are more. If not, as I said, feel very free to send more questions in by email in the next days. Yeah, okay, I get a question about what counts as a short research stay. There is no absolute answer to this. However, I can send you an answer. Let me see if I can quickly get out of the presentation and look this up in 1 second. Because the European Commission has given an answer. If I don't find it in 1 second, I will just post you the text in an email or personally. There is no absolute answer. Yeah, I'll send you the link. Doesn't matter that I give you that I read the full text now. Let me see if I can post this. Maybe I can. I'm not sure if everybody is now seeing my answer that I posted. If not, please let me know. In principle, a short visit should be, I mean, again, there's no, it depends on many things, but I would say like around 1 or 2 weeks, that's a very upper limit of what a short research stay should be. It shouldn't be something that has a huge impact on your proposal, on your project. Otherwise, it's not a short research stay. Short research stays, they are more about, you know, you go to a conference, you go to some, you know, person that famous PI for 1 or 2 days, you get to learn what they do, and then you come back, or you discuss something and you come back. Or you do a field study where you go somewhere and collect some samples and come back. But if you go somewhere and you stay there for 2 months to hunt some weird animal species in the jungle, then it's probably not a short research stay, right? There is no absolute answer for it, but we can discuss it in more specifically also, if that helps. Could you answer the last session questions too? I think I did. That's the slide that's on right now. Maybe I missed 1 or 2. In that case, please let me know. So there was 1 question that's on this slide about the written templates, and if I can provide some written templates. I answered this now twice. There was a question on examples of the Marie Curie consultants. Here's the list, you got it. There's a question on the success rates of the university and if this has an impact of the University of Luxembourg, for example. You can go to the recording and listen to it afterwards. There was a question about the host institution in part A. There was a question on whether you know, partner organizations should be academic or industrial. If I missed any, maybe just write it again. If not, these were the questions that I logged from last time, and maybe I missed 1. If so, please let me know, or again, send send your questions by email. Here's my email address, and feel free to contact me if needed. Right, so that's it for now. Let's see if there's anything more coming up. Just have a quick look in the chat if there's any questions that were misplaced there. I hope not. I don't see something on first sight. I think I answered everything on the questions. So thank you very much for staying that long and being so numerous. Thank you for your interest. I think together we can try and make the best of this proposal learning writing experience. Contact me again afterwards if you have questions, and send me your proposals as soon as possible, even if they're very early drafts. Best of luck with your writing, and yeah, have fun. I hope you learn something in the process. We all know it's hard work and that it takes time, so I appreciate your efforts, and best of luck again. So bye from my side. That's it.